we're talking about this morning, isn't it?
It is.
Yes,
It
we're
is.
talking about just life in the middle of COVID and supporting ourselves and our families, children,
Yeah.
and we problem
Yep.
solve. So I was glad to
So
do
we
that.
got this. We got this.
Yeah, we got this. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm really excited to have you here, especially being from Colorado Christian University. For those of you in our My Quiet Cave family that are unaware, CCU has just come on as one of our newest strategic partners. We're really, really excited about this partnership. And what that means for our members is that in addition to just having an awesome partner in the community, that we have partnered in this tuition discount program that CCU has, which means for the online program for the College of Adult and Graduate Studies, there's a 20% discount or a 10% discount, just depending on what program you're going into. You can find out more information on our website at myquietcave.org. And Dr. Burkhart, would you like to say anything more about just the Master of Art and
Yeah.
counseling?
So I'm the program director, as Kimberly said, of the Master of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program at CCU. So it's a part of just several online courses or programs that CCU offers through CAGS Online. So you can find out more about all of the online programs that CCU offers at online.ccu.edu. So online.ccu.edu, and there's more even if you want to find out specifically about the Master of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. That's ccu.edu/counseling. So ccu.edu/counseling. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited about this partnership. I think there's so much that My Quiet Cave and our program has in common. We're working towards the same goal, I think, of really bridging the gap between Christianity and mental health. So happy to be here, happy to speak on this topic. You know, I grew up on a pig farm in Indiana, so I'm the son of a farmer, very proud of that. Moved out here in 2005, got my master's degree in counseling, and really most of my clinical career has been working with adolescents and their families. So I've got an amazing wife, got two awesome kiddos in my life as well. So in my clinical life, I've been wrestling with adolescents and families. But to be quite honest, in the last 7 to 8 months in my own family, trying to figure out what it's like to work from home with a couple kiddos running around, work from home while the kids are trying to do school from home, and just the change that has caused for our family system and the family systems really across the world at this point has been unprecedented. So this is an important topic. Happy to be here. Looking forward to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. And for those of you that don't know, which is probably most of you, I did get my master's of counseling at CCU, and Dr. Burkhart was one of my professors. So this is kind of a pretty cool conversation to have. I know that there's so much that we could say on this topic.
Yeah.
When it comes to just under supporting families in the midst of COVID. And there's a couple of points that we really want to focus in on, and that is supporting adolescents and also just in general supporting the family as a unit. So Dr. Burkhart, just off the top of your head, under, just supporting adolescents, what is unique about that and just some practical things that we can do?
Well, I think we can all just agree that adolescence in and of itself is a unique experience that is just fraught with challenges and opportunities and a lot of emotions happening during that period of our lives. But, to really understand, I think what's facing our kiddos today is really understanding what was happening before any of this happened. So understanding that even before COVID happened, significant organizations like the UN and also the World Health Organization were beginning to have these conversations around there's something happening with the current adolescent population that at a global level that is unprecedented and unlike anything that we've seen before. There's even been some conversation between the UN and the World Health Organization that said we haven't seen this level of mental health crises in a generation since Vietnam. So it's that I think prevalent right now in our adolescent population, what they're dealing with and the challenges around mental health, specifically around anxiety, depression, hopelessness. And also, we know that there's also kind of a suicide epidemic happening right now amongst our young kiddos. And Kimberly, I don't know if you have seen anything in this in your own work at MQC. What have you guys seen in terms of adolescent needs in any way, shape, or form?
Same thing. It's a severe isolation is one of
Mm-hmm.
the big ones, because adolescents are usually pretty social by nature, especially during this developmental time, and not being able to be around other people and their peers
Yeah.
is devastating.
It is. It is. And this is what we've seen. We've just seen a lot of the challenges that adolescents were bringing into this has just kind of been exacerbated by COVID. So I think laying the groundwork that before COVID even started, we were seeing massive challenges with the adolescent population. So one of the things I want to talk about as I was preparing for today is I think understanding what adolescents were going through as they were coming in, and then also understanding where in normal development adolescents are at this period of their life. And these are kind of things that we all know, or we've all experienced either as adolescents or as parents. But I just kind of want to lay this groundwork, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So really what's happening at this stage of development is, well, like I said, we know this, adolescents are developing what we would call schemas. And schemas are basically the building blocks of what we would say knowledge is. And this really comes from Piaget and some of his work. So schemas are really just information. It's knowledge, it's experience, it's kind of an adolescent's own truth from their own experience that really helps them understand what their role is in the world, how the world works, what their role is in their peer group, what their role is in their family system, what their role is as a student, what their purpose is, what their future may be like. Schemas are kind of these building blocks of knowledge. And as an adolescent is going through the teenage years, they're just kind of adopting these kind of schemas, these kind of building blocks of knowledge. Now, what's interesting is the way in which adolescents use schemas or use this knowledge and understanding to adapt and understand their environment. One of the things that's really important to remember with adolescents in the midst of COVID is adolescents are actually very adept at, they're very apt to adapt to situations. They can really almost kind of be chameleons. They have a lot of resiliency. They can really approach a new situation and use what they know to try to figure out how they're supposed to be in that. Now, often the challenge though is with things like COVID is the question comes, does the knowledge they have empower them to respond to the situation? And it's when they can't take their schemas, their understanding of life that they've been trying to figure out throughout their teenage years, right or wrong. Sometimes it's full of emotion, often it's full of emotion, but trying to figure out what life is and what their role is in it. Figuring out, how do I take what I know about the world and respond to this situation?
Yeah.
And where we see kind of maladaptive or challenges with adolescents come out is when they can't do that. When they can't take their understanding, these schemas, when they can't take their understanding of the world, their family system, themselves, and respond to a situation, it has a hard time adapting or assimilating in that situation. And we see kiddos struggle as a result. So really what we should be trying to do with kiddos in our lives right now is helping kids figure out, kind of coming alongside them in a partnership, figure out based on what you know and how you understand your family and our relationship as mom and dad or whatever it is, how do you think you should be responding to this? How do you think your peers should be responding to this? How can you still connect with your peers? So really, we should be taking advantage of this opportunity to a certain extent, is how do we support adolescents in figuring out how to learn to overcome this? And I think the challenge that we have as parents sometimes is we often get focused on preventing something from happening versus empowering our kiddo to figure it out. And those are two slightly different things. So I've got a few things, I think a few kind of like bullet points, if I can, Kimberly, to kind of give parents. And then I know we're going to have a Q&A time at the end.
Yes. And I just want to
So,
say, you said take advantage of the opportunity, which
yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
a very positive reframing. I
You know, and
appreciate
it's
that.
tough. It's a good catch. It's tough because I think we need to recognize that COVID has ravaged our culture, our global society, our families. It has been, in so many instances, just pain and hurt and loss. And we have to first recognize that one of the things that I think kiddos and family systems are going through right now is not just changing due to COVID, but it is a lot of loss of friendships, loss of connection, loss of loved ones, loss of jobs. COVID has ravaged us in so many ways. And I think this is the opportunity that not only mental health counselors have, but also the church has. I think more than ever, our culture has no hope that things are going to get better. The things that we have dealt with, not just in 2020, but honestly leading up to it, has really brought us to a point of hopelessness in many ways. And it feels as if sometimes we're just kind of clawing our way through, trying to hang on in the midst of all of this. And I think if there's anything that Jesus offers us as followers, is hope. That hope in things that will get better, the kingdom that he is bringing, the kingdom that he is trying to instill on earth is a kingdom of hope. And that's what I think we as believers have to offer in the midst of all of this, is just the hope that is Jesus. So I talk about opportunity, recognizing that there's a lot of pain and grief and loss in this as well. So it is kind of, I'm trying to reframe it to a certain extent without invalidating the pain. And that's a tough thing, I think, to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think you do that well. I wanted to point that out because I appreciate that. Yeah, because you also use the words empower too, and empowering our young people. So say a little more about that. What are those things that, like me as a parent, like what I do as a parent?
Sure.
Maybe.
I think one of the things plaguing our young kiddos, and there's two books that I think really capture some of the plight that our young kids are facing really well. One of them is The Coddling of the American Mind, and the other one is The Madness of Crowds. So Coddling of the American Mind and The Madness of Crowds. Two really good books that capture really kind of what's going on with our culture right now. And one of the things that I say that I often see in kiddos today is, and this is not an official diagnosis, this is something that I made up. So pig farmer from Indiana made this up. So, so full disclaimer there. But I call it RDD, resiliency deficiency disorder.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And I feel like what's happening is, as parents, we're getting really good at protecting our kiddos and doing a really good job at keeping them from potential risks and challenges. And that's coming from a place of absolute love and care for our kids. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there are some situations when, as we do that, we're kind of taking away an opportunity for our kid to learn to overcome challenges. And so one of the things that's really interesting to me is, if you look at, let's say, suicide rates and kind of the demographics that suicide typically hits, what's interesting, and I haven't read any research on this, so this is my own clinical observation, is that when you get, let's say, in some lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, most of my work is with gang kids here in the Denver area, predominantly Bloods. That's where I've mostly done most of my clinical work. And suicide rates in lower socioeconomic areas typically aren't that high. But then we get, let's say, to more affluent areas, more affluent neighborhoods, counties, cities, and we begin to see suicide rates climb. That's always been an interesting thing for me to kind of notice. And I think there's a lot of different factors that come into that. I think one of the things that could potentially be playing a role in this is, my gang kiddos When they stepped outside the door, it was sheer adversity, nonstop, 24/7. They were constantly having to figure out how to overcome challenges, especially my kids who were trying to get out of the gang. There are times where I wonder if kiddos in other neighborhoods are not facing the same level of adversity. And as a result, this resiliency isn't developing to the fullest extent it could in some areas. So I think one of the things that we have to be okay with as parents is at times allowing our kids to overcome things and empowering them to figure things out, to overcome challenges, to get a few scrapes at times on their knees as they're trying to figure things out as they grow up. Because it's that development of resiliency, that development of overcoming challenges that's really going to prepare them for adulthood. So when we talk about supporting adolescents in this process, the number one thing is, I would say, empowering the process of your kiddos learning to overcome a challenge rather than trying to prevent some foreboding end result.
Yeah.
I think it's good for us as parents to look down the road, and there are times where we need to put a stop to this and it doesn't get to that point. But there are other times where I think we need to let our kids overcome things.
Which
And I think
sounds so nice when you say it, but it's so hard.
it is. It is.
I
Like,
don't want my kids to hurt. You know,
yeah,
I want more for them than I had, and it's like, but I can't do
100%.
some of these things that I went through, and but
Yeah.
I understand that it's important. So
I've got this amazing, brilliant, good-hearted 12-year-old in my life, and this beautiful little 6-year-old who's getting ready to turn 7. And I want to protect them from everything I possibly can. But there are times where we are too good at that as parents. And I think that there are some advantages that our culture has right now, whether it's tech or even at times, given our own socioeconomic status, the resources that we have. There are times where we can maybe do that a little too well. I'm 100% guilty of that. So I think recognizing that in COVID, there is some, and again, I say opportunity, recognizing the pain in this,
right.
but there's some opportunity where you as a parent can actually partner with and come alongside your kiddo and figure things out together and empower them to overcome some of these challenges that they're facing.
Okay.
That's
I like
the first
that.
one.
Number
Okay,
one.
and I promise my other ones are much quicker.
No,
So,
that was really interesting. I'm glad we went on about that. So
number 2, kind of similar. Have collaborative conversations rather than instructional ones.
okay.
So again, engaging them in the problem-solving process versus saying, "Hey, here's what I think you need to do." Right? Again,
What we do as counselors, right? As therapists.
yeah, it's what us shrinks do. Like we're just, we empower others in their problem-solving process versus like, let me give you some advice, right? So that's also what makes counseling so powerful. We know that it's that type of dynamic, that therapeutic relationship that empowers people versus the advice giving.
Right.
So collaborative conversations versus instructional ones.
I like that.
Number 3, I think as parents, we can ask ourselves, what strength-based view of our adolescents' of themselves, do you want your kiddo to adopt into their worldview? So how do you want them to understand themselves in the midst of everything that's going on? Ask yourself that question, then I think you should model that. I think you should model that worldview, that kind of view of self in the mix of all of this. I think we often feel like our kids don't listen to a darn thing that we say. And we're probably right most of the time. But the reality is they are listening to you, but they're also listening to their peers. They're listening to everybody else they're just trying to get as much information as possible and make a decision. So they are listening to you. It just doesn't always feel like it. And they're also watching you. Number 4, kids need structure. 100%. We need structure to develop well. And I think school has often provided the structure. They've lost that in many instances. So if your kiddo doesn't have structure in their day, partner with them to develop some structure. And then number 5, and I think this may tick a lot of parents off, Kimberly, so let me just apologize straight up. We may need to allow our kids to have unrestricted screen time in the midst of this. And here's what I mean. they've lost their connections with their friends. And that is incredibly important. They did a study, researcher by the Leslie McDonald did a study, and it was on why kiddos have such a high propensity to be on their phone while they're driving. And what they found out was the kids were sincerely concerned about missing out on some aspect of their friend's life, not knowing what was going on. So there was this risk-taking behavior that was being driven by this desire to connect with their friends. And I think this is a reality right now. With COVID, they've lost some of those contacts, and maybe not entirely, depending on your school district and things like that. But in a lot of instances, kiddos have lost some connection with their friends. And the way in which they are connecting with them is typically through screens. So whether it's phone calls, text messages, FaceTime, Fortnite, whatever it is, this is how they're engaging their friends. And I think in a normal situation, I think healthy boundaries on screen time is appropriate. And I'm not saying that we should be boundaryless. But what I am saying is just a recognition for us as parents is that right now our kids are connecting very importantly with their peer group through screens. And we may need to adjust some of the rules that we've put in place around that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes sense.
All right. So those are my 5 tips. I think I went over, Kimberly, I'm so sorry, but those are my 5 tips with kind of working with kiddos.
No, you're fine. So what I'm hearing a lot of is we need to tighten the reins on the structure, but kind of let go with some other things, right?
Yep. And when we talk about family systems, and we'll get to this whenever you're ready, but successful families in this are going to be the families who know where to engage stability and know where to engage flexibility. Okay. That's the balance, is stability and flexibility as a family system and as parents in the midst of this. Where do we put structure and put rules and put boundaries, and where do we let go of some of that stuff in the midst of all of this?
And I think with our adolescents, that was incredibly helpful for me, and also insightful, just understanding a little more, getting a refresher on my adolescent stages and some of the things that we're going through. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, and also, just as parents, first of all, let's just as parents give ourselves some grace in this. I mean, there's nothing, like, first of all, we have no manual for parenthood in the first place, right? That's a common joke. And then you throw 2020 into the mix, and it's like, oops, there's nothing that's prepared us for this. And if you're a single parent going through this, honestly, Marvel should be calling you to do a movie on you as a freaking superhero. I mean, that's the truth. I don't know how single parents are managing kids at home, doing school, working. It's just incredible. So I think just recognizing that some of the things that I'm recommending are kind of like, hey, here's the best case scenario. But even I stink at some of these things in my own life, right? And there's just so much going on. We do the best we can with what we got, and we give ourselves some grace.
No, this was so helpful. I really appreciate it. It's better than just the advice I've been giving myself, which is just to lower my expectations in everything, in every part of my life. So these are a little more practical moving forward, because that was helpful the first month, but we need to, we're still in this, so we need some practical tools that can help us. So thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Of course.